Hello everyone, Dr. Ames here. This time I'd like to talk to you about how economic conditions affect business. Now, when we think about economic systems, um, they really either promote or they hinder your business activity in your culture, in your country. And so an economic system is really speaking directly to the amount of government involvement in business. And therefore, that level of involvement affects the success of business in many different ways. So, when it, and here in America, much of our business success is really due to an economic and social climate that allows businesses to operate freely. And we do operate by the free market system. We're governed by supply and demand issues. So in the U.S., we have all the favorable conditions of the free market economy, which are very favorable to privately owned business. Any change that we might make in our U.S. economic system would certainly have an immediate and major influence on the business systems and the way we do things. For example, a change in trade policy is going to have a large or small effect on business, but it's definitely going to affect someone. Um, and we have to think about globalism in general. As I've discussed with the various environments that business operates in, the global environment is rife with world politics and all the things that happen out there in the international sphere that are sometimes within our means to control somewhat, but quite often aren't. And they're things out of our control. These things all have a major influence on U.S. business. And so things like terrorist attacks and wars and natural disasters can all change the way business operates. Um, for one thing, we find that just population estimates, finding out a demographic like that, the world's latest statistics on population growth has an impact on business. And what we find is that all of a sudden the statistics seem to be showing that the world is growing slightly slower than expected when it comes to population. But really, what determines the level of business that you do in any region or area of the world is determined by the people who are there. And so the age demographics or the breakdowns of age and earnings and all of that stuff really do define how business happens. So the next thing to talk about here are a few basic terms so we really understand what's going on, at least in the most basic way, with the economic conditions and how that has an influence on business. So really the first question is, what is economics? And it's really a separate field, and it's about the study of how society chooses to employ resources to produce goods and services, and how those goods and services are distributed to consumers for consumption. And those consumers are generally various competing groups and individuals and so forth. So economics has a couple different fields to it, and it's broken down most generally into something that we already know about, macroeconomics and microeconomics. Macroeconomics is simply the part of economics that studies and looks at the operation of, say, a nation's economy as a whole. So it's a bigger picture, and you can take this macro look and apply it to any region or system of economics or country and take a macro look at it and look at the larger forces that are happening. Microeconomics is the part of economics that really looks at the behavior of people and organizations in very particular markets, and so more down at the ground level where transactions are happening and so forth. So macro is a bigger, wider look from a greater distance, and micro is more about the nuts and bolts of everyday things that happen out there that are really both considered economic activity. That leads us really to talk slightly about resource development. Resource development goes hand in hand, whether you're talking about micro or macro. And really, resource development is simply the study of how do we increase resources and how do we create conditions that we can make better use of those resources. Because at the end of the day, what we want to be doing is being successful in business and being effective. And there are a few ways to increase resources. For instance, we could look out and try and find some new energy sources. Well, it seems like we've suddenly discovered wind power, although the wind has been around forever, but we've figured out how to get electricity from it now, and on a larger scale than ever before, and technology has moved ahead, and so new energy sources mean, particularly in the case of wind power, a clean sort of energy that doesn't harm the environment and doesn't add more hydrocarbons to our atmosphere and so forth. So as far as climate change goes, finding particularly green new energy sources is always going to be something that is going to be big business into the future. We could also increase our resources by finding new ways to grow food. Well, something like that, you would think, oh, okay, let's just apply science. Well, unfortunately, gene-modified sorts of foods are suspect around the world. People are not just embracing that we can go in and change the DNA of some plants and have them produce some slightly different characteristics. There is suspicion out there. There is a sense that maybe we haven't studied these things enough and we don't know what the long-term effects are going to be, and so forth. But certainly, new ways of growing food and so forth are going to meet demands into the future. Even if the population growth is slowing slightly around the world, it's still increasing all the time, and we're headed for many hundreds of billions of people. And finally, maybe the last example I would give here of resource development is new ways of creating goods and services. And this comes right out of our technological environment. New processes, new technology, new thinking on how to do something, breakthroughs in energy and communications, all these sorts of things are new ways to further our use and success in the marketplace when it comes to goods and services. Okay, everyone, that's all I wanted to talk about this time.